Hello, I'm Brigantia, Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to the series Pagan Problems. This week's topic is dealing with death. Now, I know this isn't exactly a lollipops and kittens kind of topic, but please stay with me and give me a chance. Death is a complicated subject, and for obvious reasons, it sparks highly charged emotional responses. But one of the tasks of religion and spirituality is to delve into this mystery, to attempt to explain what death means, and to expound upon ideas about the afterlife. With the Samhain season, with both the Lord and the Lady being in the other world, spirits roving around, and the dead making their journey through the veil, there really is no more appropriate time to discuss death, what it is, what it means for us, and what kind of afterlife we might have waiting for us on the other side. I understand that this is a deeply uncomfortable topic for many people, but I would encourage you to still stick around, to watch the video, think about the ideas I'm going to discuss, and perhaps this could even be part of your journey to feel less uneasy about the subject. So let us begin. We are going to start with general perceptions of death. Now, as an event, death is inevitable. This is something we all understand from a relatively early age, whether we're talking about plant life, animal life, ourselves, possibly even the gods. We know some deities have a seasonal life, death, and rebirth cycle, but there are some suggestions that this can go beyond symbolic or metaphorical life and death and rebirth cycles, and might be something that's a little bit more literal. It's possible that their reincarnation process, the way they renew, it might be something that we're just not really privy to, that no one's explained the details about it because, well, you could even make the argument that as far as the gods are concerned with how they might renew themselves, well, we are not gods, so perhaps it's their business, not ours. But still, it's possible. It's something to think about. Another thing to consider is that death is dispassionate. It doesn't take into account age, sex, marital status, family relationships, friendships, business affairs, spiritual beliefs, or whether or not anyone is ready. And that's really what makes death such a tragedy, such an extreme tragedy most of the time, because it's life being cut short, whether it's due to injury or illness or even worse, by someone's own hand. There are all these things that have been left undone, words that have been left unsaid, all those moments that didn't happen. It is the pain of an unlived life and of all the loss of all of that potential. But then on the other hand, sometimes death comes as a mercy. It can come as the end of suffering after a prolonged and difficult illness, or after someone has lived an extremely long life, and it's not so much that they are being taken by death as they are fading into it. What we are taught as children about death also has an impact on how we think about it now. And of course, if the adults in our lives when we were growing up had an especially difficult struggle with the concept of death, or had a hard time accepting the loss of a loved one or a close friend, we may have grown up with an extra sense of anxiety that we still carry with us today. What we were taught about the afterlife, or what we believe now, questions we have about what is going to happen, to me, to you, to the people around us, that can have a profound effect on our view of death. So what we're going to do now is to get into several afterlife concepts. These are not strictly pagan ideas, but because a lot of these ideas are widespread, I thought it was worth kind of giving a general overview. Obviously, this is not going to be completely detailed and going into every single permutation and facet. Think of it as just kind of base ideas, and if one of these ideas is resonating with you, then that's something you could research and look into on your own after this video. So to begin with, pardon me. Sometimes people teach that death is the end of consciousness. You will find this in secular realm and sometimes in religious realms. In fact, this is what I was taught by my Jehovah's Witness parents, and it's a reflection of their religious doctrine. The Jehovah's Witness organization teaches that nothing of the spirit survives physical death. The only hope they have is that a certain amount of people, and they claim it's 144,000, they will be resurrected to a heavenly life, and that in a post-Armageddon world that there will be a general resurrection of humankind, and then these are the people who will have a chance to grow to perfection, whatever that's supposed to mean, over the course of 1,000 years. And then after that, there will be a great huge test, and whoever survives that test will have life everlasting on Earth. That's one idea. Other people who do look at things in the more secular light may also think that no consciousness survives death, but then other people who are inclined towards the secular view, they will point out the scientific principle that energy cannot be destroyed. And so they speculate what that might mean for the human spirit. If our minds or a piece of our minds goes on somehow and exists in a non-corporeal form. This is certainly a line of thought that has more questions than answers, but nevertheless it shows that even people who don't consider themselves religious or spiritual or even really believing in anything divine or beyond humanity, it shows that they're still curious. They're still asking the questions and trying to find answers for what is going to happen after we're done here on Earth. The next idea I'm going to touch on is one of the most common ideas about the afterlife and involves variations on the idea that people will either go to heaven or to hell, or as the Catholic Church also has it, an in-between place called purgatory. Now, depending on how people conducted themselves during life, that's thought to determine their destination after death. The next possibility, of course, is reincarnation, and there are a lot of variations on this idea. As individuals go through a process of life, death, and rebirth, how this process takes place, what the purpose of it all is. I'm going to touch on a few possibilities. I don't want you to think that these are the only possibilities out there, but these are ones that I commonly encounter. First, we can't talk about reincarnation without talking about the Hindu view that it's possible to be reincarnated as an animal as well as a human. The behaviors of your past are thought to determine your present status in this life, and how you behave now will determine where you end up later. Then we have Buddhism, and the ultimate goal of the reincarnation process in Buddhism is to attain nirvana and to be released from the process of rebirth and to have your consciousness absorbed into a larger whole, and essentially you cease to exist as an individual. Other schools of thought teach that reincarnation happens strictly along familial lines, and if your family line comes to an end, then the cycle of reincarnation is broken, and your spirit has nothing to go into for any other incarnations. So if that's the case, it certainly puts a different light on the issue of if people choose not to reproduce or find themselves unable to do so. Food for thought. Fourth possibility, this is less common, but it's still worth bringing up because more people find their minds open to such an idea. I have heard some people express that if there are aliens out there, extraterrestrials, ETs, whatever you want to call them, that it's possible we may reincarnate into other species who have a comparable human intelligence, and that they may also reincarnate into our species. And that would make the process of reincarnation truly intergalactic. Make of that what you will. And the last version of reincarnation I'm going to discuss is the one that you most often find in paganism. It's quite a general idea. It's not terribly dogmatic. We live, we die, we spend a non-specific period of time in the other world, and then you reincarnate into human form. Now, also in the pagan realm, specifically Norse pagans, there are several possible destinations. The first and most famous, of course, is Valhalla. This is where the honorable dead who fell in battle and were chosen by Odin, that's where they go. There's lots of eating and drinking and fighting. The idea is that they will fight again at Ragnarok. So beforehand, it's half feasting, half training. You'll find a lot of Norse pagans would like to go there, but it's for Odin to decide, so I guess they'll find out once time comes. The next destination is Folkvang. These are warriors who are claimed by Freya. I believe she's entitled to half of those on the battlefield who fall, and I think she gets first pick, but I would have to review a little bit more to be sure about that. Not much has been really said about this place, but Freya's the one who rules it, so it's probably going to be a pleasant and a desirable destination. Then the third possible destination is Helheim, ruled by Hel, who was the daughter of Loki and Agraboda, which is kind of a general destination for the Norse after death. It's a place of rest. It isn't considered bad. Sometimes visually it's described as existing in a fog. It wouldn't be a very eventful place, but it's also not a place of torment by any stretch of the imagination. For those who die at sea specifically, because, of course, in the Norse era and the Viking era in particular, a lot of time was spent on ships, and of course, periodically people did die. The idea is that anyone who died at sea would spend their afterlife in the depths of the ocean with Ran, who was a giantess, and the depths of the ocean was her home. Not a lot of other details about it. Then we have Helgafell, which is a holy mountain in which the dead more or less carry on business as usual as they did in life, which honestly doesn't sound so bad. From the descriptions I've had of it, it's like the life we have now, but with slightly less trouble involved with it. What we're used to, just a little bit more of the ups rather than the downs. Now we have Celtic paganism, and this brings us to the idea of the Summerland, which is also called the Otherworld. This was essentially life as it was, but without disease, without pain, without sadness. And you'll find that in some of the Celtic graves, no matter where they were, it wasn't uncommon for a variety of items to be buried alongside the dead so that they could take them with them in the afterlife. And this wasn't a place to fear. It was part of the natural order. There was happiness and abundance. There was a belief that your dead loved ones could come back and visit you on Samhain. So it was a change in your relationships with the dead, but it wasn't a severing. You were not completely disconnected from it. So I think in a lot of ways that did tend to make death a little bit easier to accept, which especially in the ancient world, with death coming so easily through war and disease and just natural disasters and failed crops and goodness knows what else, the idea that death isn't so bad and that it will be okay, and that even if you can't see someone with your physical eyes, that you can still sense their presence at certain times of the year, I imagine that would have been a great comfort. Now we have the Greco-Roman system, which is kind of a three-tier system. First, we have Tartarus, which is an outright place of punishment, and it's also coincidentally where the Titans are bound. Then we have the Asphodel Meadows. This is kind of a general place that people went after death. People who were neither too good nor too bad, just kind of your average person who was doing the best they could as they went along. The idea is that they could drink from a source of water called the Lethe River, and this enabled them to forget their life on Earth and just kind of go about their business. Then we have the fields of Elysium, and this is where the truly heroic humans went to rest, and they would spend an eternity enjoying various pleasures. That's definitely the top tier where you could end up, and it's also, interestingly, quite similar to what was eventually adopted in Christianity, the idea of a place of punishment, hell, and then a place of reward, heaven, or Elysium in the case of the Greeks, and then the um, the asphodel meadows. There we go. Also being kind of a stand-in for the idea of purgatory. Of, you weren't really good, you weren't really bad, you just kind of were, and you're just going about your business. It is interesting that that is what was ultimately adopted within certainly Catholicism and to a lesser extent other denominations of Christianity. We all owe more to the Greeks and Romans for our modern world as it stands than we realize. Next, we have the ancient Egyptians. They believed in a land of two fields. And Osiris was the god who opened up the possibility for all humans to get into the afterlife. Before then, it was gods and pharaohs. But he's the one who made it accessible for everyone. So in order to get there, your heart would have to be light, and your name would have to be written down somewhere, on your coffin at the very least, and your body would have to have been preserved, preferably mummified. The Egyptians believed that the soul was made up of two parts, the Ba and the Ka. So during the day, the Ba would go and look after the family, and the Ka would be in the land of two fields having a good old time. And then at night, both the Ba and the Ka would return to the tomb to rest and get ready for the next day. But if the body was damaged, or the tomb was plundered or destroyed, then the Ka could not enter into the land of two fields. And this is part of what made grave robbing such an unforgivable crime, because it wasn't just the theft or the damage that was done, it was depriving someone of their afterlife and the rewards that they had earned. Now, if your heart was found to not be light because you had committed crimes or you had done bad in your life, then the god Ammit would eat you up, and then that was that. So there was some motivation for the ancient Egyptians to mind their P's and Q's. Now, as we look at all of this, it is an open question for a lot of us whether or not the afterlife is universal for each person, or if your spiritual beliefs determine your outcome in the afterlife. Now, our choices in the here and now determine our destiny, what we choose to do for a living, who we marry, if we marry, whether or not we have children, and as well as other events that are beyond our control, like, natural disasters, disruptive historical events, and of course, how we react to all of that. It makes a difference in how our life turns out. So it's not unreasonable to conclude that the god or gods that we worship may have arrangements for the people who are under their jurisdiction, for lack of a better term. And so our relationship with them, whether or not we lived our lives in accordance with their standards and values, that may well determine what afterlife we end up in and what our conditions are in that afterlife. There's a lot to think about there. Now, next, let's discuss making our peace with mortality. I have a theory that people's genuine spiritual beliefs have a direct impact on how they react when someone dies, or when they experience a serious illness, or when they are feeling significant fear. Now, the way people have reacted to the COVID hysteria has been twofold. One part of that reaction is the direct result of what media outlets and governments told people to think and believe, and whether or not individuals listening to all that find such institutions to be trustworthy sources of information in any sense of the term. The other part to this is a reaction that is a reflection of what people actually believe, not what we say, not what's lying on the surface, what we actually believe at a gut level. Now, the way people acted and still act, that tells me they either don't actually believe there's any hope for an afterlife for themselves, and that once they snuff it here, that really is just the end of them, or they think they're not headed to a good place in the afterlife. When you look at it through that lens, it makes certain things a little bit more clear, doesn't it? Now, what makes this even more striking is that the threat of the illness that has caused this major existential crisis that is absolutely worldwide, this illness has a survival rate in excess of 99%. Think about that for a moment. As a whole, the population of the world has an over 99% chance of recovering from the illness in question, and yet a surprising number of people are convinced that it's a death sentence. This is what fear of death really looks like, and I would argue that this is what fear of the afterlife, or a lack of hope in an afterlife, does to people. It causes hysteria, irrational reactions, and existence at all cost mentality that loses sight of the fact that life involves risk. We cannot avoid risk, and the attempt to eliminate risk from the world is not only doomed to failure, but it is decidedly unhealthy. Life is to be lived. Mere existence falls short of the mark, and treating life as something to be endured is a recipe for mental collapse. So the current state of affairs is this. We live in a world in which many people have an exaggerated fear of death. Others are sick of the entire affair, and they are actively seeking out risks, probably just to remind themselves that they're still alive and they want to feel alive. And then we have others who are experiencing a crisis of faith and are actively questioning their spiritual convictions and what those convictions are based on. So this is a time when we could all use some extra support, and for that we can spend more time bonding with our family and friends. But to address the spiritual aspects of death, the afterlife, and what we actually believe, that's when it's a good idea to seek out spiritual community. Even if you have to make do with online communities, it's still worthwhile to seek out the like-minded. If you can find a group that's a similar tradition to yours or works with the same pantheon, then that's a good place to start a conversation. Share your anxieties, where your thoughts have taken you. It may very well be that others are wrestling with similar things. You can find some fellow feeling, understanding, and maybe even some perspective that helps you feel more at peace. You could also review the lore that shaped your current beliefs, and that can be an extremely helpful thing to do. Sometimes we just need to go back, look at things with different eyes, and think it through, and contemplate how all of these ideas fit into the bigger picture and how we view the universe and how we actually believe the universe works. It is a matter of faith, so this isn't strictly an intellectual process, but it can help. And if you find you are in a different place spiritually than where you were, then even that is a starting point for further exploration. So, death. It is a natural event, and while we don't and shouldn't go out of our way to experience it, because after all, we are not Klingons, and today is not a good day to die, it is an excellent day to live. But we can come to terms with it. It's a healthy thing to do. Life is precious, and we should cherish it, and we should take care of ourselves and try to experience as much as life has to offer. That has value and meaning. But when the time comes, and the hour arrives when we shed our mortal coil, then wouldn't it be nice to face it with a sense of hope in our hearts? Thinking about what lies beyond and talking about it within our spiritual brethren can make things easier in the here and now and when we cross through the veil. So in that vein, if you have enjoyed this video and you'd like to discuss these ideas and you haven't already joined us at Blackbird's Brew, there will be a link in the description box below. You just click it and you're able to join right in. We are a talkative bunch and we enjoy conversation, and we are no stranger to dealings with heavier subjects. We've been getting into the nitty-gritty on a lot of things, so if that's where you are and you're needing to vent or unload or just have someone hear you, that is a place to do it. And also, if you have not done so already, please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and leave me a comment if the spirit should so move you. But that's it for now. I will see you in another video tomorrow. Bye.